Okay, so we humans have been talking about living on Mars for decades now, but how much thought have we given to what that would actually look like?
We know it required technology we don't have yet, but let's just assume that we get there. So here's a detailed vision of what living on Mars could be like. First, forget everything you've seen in the movies about living underground in giant domes. Mars has tons of resources available to us, which means we don't need to go to such extremes. And we also want to live like real Martians, if you know what I mean. While there are some obvious differences between Earth and Mars, the two planets are similar enough in size and gravity that we could keep life on. Mars fairly similar to how we live on Earth, maybe not exactly the same, but familiar. Living on Mars would look a lot like living in an extreme environment on Earth. Places like Antarctica and the Arctic already have some pretty cool infrastructure built up to sustain human life under tough conditions. Mars would be a lot like that. Living on Mars would probably feel a lot like going to live and work in Antarctica. That is, if you're into freezing temperatures, complete darkness for half the year, and very limited access to fresh food. But unlike Antarctica, Mars doesn't have any water for us to use. So we'll have to rely on our own resources or get creative. Since we can't bring Earth's atmosphere to Mars, the air we breathe on Mars would be different. Mars's atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide, just like our air on Earth is mostly nitrogen. However, Mars's atmosphere is so thin that it's only about 1% as dense as ours. That means that while we could stay alive on Mars, we wouldn't be able to function the way we do back home. On Earth, we can breathe oxygen in and breathe carbon dioxide out. The chemical reaction that produces energy in our bodies needs oxygen. Since the air on Mars is mostly carbon dioxide, we'd have to find another way to take in oxygen. We'd also need to somehow make the thin atmosphere thicker so that we don't die of suffocation. To do that, we need to trap carbon dioxide molecules inside and somehow turn them into liquid form. There's a crazy idea. What if we just made it snow on Mars? Snow on Mars could work. Our best bet would be to use the super cold temperatures on Mars to liquefy the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Just like when we put a lid on a pot of boiling water, the pressure from the vapor would push the water back into liquid form, and this would create massive amounts of carbon dioxide snow. And you may be asking yourself, how do I know that Mars has the right temperature to liquefy CO2? Well, experiments have shown that at about 123 kilopascals of pressure, which is about 1 in 2 times what we experience on Earth, and at a temperature of negative 123 degrees Celsius, carbon dioxide will liquefy. These conditions are perfect for Mars. The planet's average surface temperature is negative 63 degrees Celsius, and its atmospheric pressure is about 6 kilopascals. So we don't have to worry about warming things up too much. But we do need to figure out how to increase the pressure. Now, here's where things get really complicated. Increasing the pressure would require us to build some sort of shelter. It couldn't be completely open like a dome because the carbon dioxide would boil and escape back into the atmosphere. So we'd need something that can enclose a big space. Now, we could try to make giant enclosed spaces out of solid materials like metal or glass, but those would block most of the sunlight. We'd need to keep the inside of our shelters perpetually dark, which isn't ideal. But there's another option. What if we made our shelters out of water? Water is clear, so it lets light pass through. And we already know that we can use it to liquefy carbon dioxide. In fact, the pressure produced by a layer of water would be enough to trap the carbon dioxide and make it snow. We can't pump liquid water directly into the air because it would float away. But we can try to make a lake. We can create a low spot in our colony where water can naturally collect and pool. By making the bottom of this area a bit deeper than the surrounding land, we can make a closed container of sorts. This would allow the water to collect without escaping. If we can make a deep enough lake, it could even be used for swimming and other water activities. As long as the water was kept at a freezing temperature, the air inside the shelter would become breathable. So your life on Mars would include having an ice rink as your main source of breathable air. How great! But here's where it gets better. The air in our water shelters would still be mostly carbon dioxide. But since the atmosphere outside would also be mostly carbon dioxide, the difference wouldn't be so drastic. We could install special devices in our shelters to pull in air from the outside. We can then filter out the carbon dioxide and release the oxygen we need to breathe. This means that we could spend most of our time outside working and exploring in what would essentially be scuba gear. Of course, we'd need some sort of suit to protect us from the radiation and freezing temperatures. But we'd be able to walk around on the surface just like we do on Earth, so we wouldn't have to worry about being trapped in our pressurized bubbles all the time. We'd be able to explore the Martian surface like astronauts on the moon. In theory, this would work. But remember, it's just a theory until we try it out. Researchers have been studying the possibility of creating artificial atmospheres on Mars for decades. Most recently, researchers at NASA and the University of Cambridge have been looking into the feasibility of these giant water shelters. They published their findings in the journal Acta Astronautica in 2020. According to their calculations, the shelters would need to be about 120 meters wide and 75 meters deep, about the size of a small swimming pool. Of course, we'd need to figure out how to transport all that water to Mars, but the researchers say that we could make up for that by melting the water that we find on Mars. Yes, we may never know how much water is hidden under the surface of Mars, but scientists have discovered evidence of water ice near the poles. According to NASA, we could use the ice found in these areas to support up to 1 million people indefinitely. In fact, we may even find liquid water on Mars. In 2020, researchers published a paper in Nature Astronomy claiming that they'd discovered evidence of subglacial lakes. Their research suggests that there could be around 50 lakes underneath the icy surface of Mars. We haven't been able to confirm these findings yet, but if they're true, we'd have a practically endless supply of water for our Martian colonies. So you get to live in a giant bubble on Mars, breathe in carbon dioxide and swim underwater. Sounds amazing, right? Well, maybe not for everyone. But hey, we haven't even talked about the giant spiders yet. How would you feel about moving to Mars?
Let us know in the comments.
The Unmolding Science channel delves into the unseen mechanisms that shape our world. From quantum mechanics to neural networks, we explore the science behind everyday life and the cutting-edge research that's changing the world. We believe that science is for everyone, and we're committed to making it accessible, understandable, and engaging for all our viewers.
Thanks for watching.